Dan SÖDERGREN is an AI and technology expert. Welcome along, Dan. What do you make of this idea with your expertise?
Well, I think it's a really interesting one. I think the Australian government, I think over in Australia, I think it's something like 500,000 accounts have now been taken down across all social media platforms. And so it is interesting that this is getting more and more attention, not only in the UK, but also in parts of Europe as well. But we've got to really work out how this is all going to be possible from a technical point of view.
Yeah, and how? What do you think? How does this work? Because for me, I look at it now and I just think the horse has bolted. How do you try and implement this and enforce it, if you like?
Well, there's a couple of different ways, of course, and technology is kind of part of the problem, but also part of the kind of solution. So with AI, the artificial intelligence, and the kind of clever computer stuff behind the scenes, it will kind of it doesn't know your age, but they can certainly guess it. The AI can kind of infer your age from behaviour and language and that kind of thing. But of course, it's not proof. But to fix it and to make it absolutely 100%, you've got to start linking social media to passports and government IDs, and that's something we've really got to kind of worry about and kind of really should worry us because yeah, we absolutely must protect children online, but we've also got to think about the second and third consequences, as that other person was saying. The kids we're protecting online today are the adults and potential protesters of tomorrow. You've got to remember that social media is often used in protesting against governments, etc. So we've got to be careful that when we build these systems that track and verify and monitor them now, that we're not actually limiting their freedoms later on. Technology can
Yeah.
help, yes, but it's more down to parenting and education and those side of things, and the ethics and all those things are very, very important that we teach young people rather
Yeah.
than necessarily doing a ban that we can only 100% enforce
Mm.
if we start using government IDs and social media linking to passports and other things, which actually later on
Yeah.
might be quite dangerous for us as a society.
Dan, okay, so with your expertise, like I say, AI and technology, this is a space and an industry that moves incredibly quickly. The pace is just, it's beyond a lot of parents to even try and keep up. Where do you see the dangers then for under 16s at the moment when it comes to social media? Personally or in your own opinion, where do you see those dangers?
Well, I've got a teenage daughter myself, so I know that there's lots of research out there that says things like Instagram and others are not particularly great for the mental health of young people for a variety of different reasons. And this is not just mobile use and social media. There's a whole raft of things online. We've got to have a kind of a digital Green Cross code almost nowadays, where we've got to be teaching young people that they shouldn't be online all the time and they shouldn't be on their mobile phones all the time and those things. And it's all to do with around addiction, etc. That's a massive education piece, which unfortunately right now I think is lacking in society. And I think that's really where we've got to start looking. But the positives of social media, and I used to teach people how to use social media for business, etc. Those positives, I think we've got to be careful that we don't start, demonising social media too much and making it the kind of the boogeyman when actually in reality there's a lot of positives out of social media. It's not all negatives. Unfortunately, there are a lot of negatives, and we've got to realise that it's not just social media. It's online use as well. So in areas like gaming as well, like Roblox and these other places, there are other dangers as well. But we've got to teach young people about those dangers. It's a little bit like saying, all roads are bad because some people unfortunately get hit by cars. Well, actually, that's to do with learning more about road safety, isn't it? And making sure you cross, you look both ways before it was you cross the road, as
Yeah,
I was
no,
always
by
taught
all
when I was
means.
young.
I like the fact that you've used the analogies of, Green Cross Code and crossing the road. 'Cause these are things that I remember growing up very much big campaigns for young people when we were all growing up. But the ban in Australia, very early days. Any news on the success so far? How it's working at all?
Well, as I say, there's a huge number of accounts that they have restricted. Remember, what they're doing is flagging this up with AI, and then they're saying you've got to now prove what your age is, and it's normally done through a parent saying yes, they are the right age, and it's something like 500,000. I mean, huge numbers, really. And this, of course, is across all the different platforms, so including things like TikTok, Twitch, etc. So it has, in that respect, worked. But of course, it doesn't tell you how many times a young person's then created a new account. But also, young people are very clever, so you can get around this, of course, by simply setting up a VPN line and just bouncing it from a different country where these rules don't apply. So there are very easy ways you would get around this as a young person, and there are actually some really clever ways as well that young people are showing that they can use,
Yeah.
even using AI and facial recognition mocking software and voice recognition mocking software
Putting
to get
wrinkles on their
around these
face.
rules. So,
I've
of
seen,
course,
yeah.
it's never 100%.
And just on that, what are the trends at the moment then with the current generation? I guess Generation Alpha, if you like. So those that were born, 16 or so years ago. Are they kind of rejecting social media? I feel like I see different subcultures that are definitely behaving differently to our generation or the generation just after.
Well, this is one of the other ironies, is the fact that actually we're saying to young people, we're going to ban you from using social media, but some of the main social medias that we thought they might be using, things like Facebook, there's no way that my child uses Facebook. My parents use Facebook. It's more for grandparents than it is for young people. And of course, you're seeing this kind of semi-backlash against social media because, of course, they're clever enough to know. And actually, they've seen all this stuff online that they know it's not necessarily great for them. Of course, you're using more and more things like Snapchat and more and more things like WhatsApp, etc. It's more to do with instant messaging than it is to do with user-generated content. But the rise of things like TikTok, in that generation is a huge phenomenon. So we cannot say that they don't use it a lot, but they're most probably not going to use it as much as my generation did. And they're certainly not going to use the same ones as my generation or the generation before or after. So yes, there's always changes with these things. But yeah, more and more young people are actually getting off social media rather than getting on. So it's a strange time to be bringing in this ban. It's most probably about 10 years too late.
Okay, well, Dan, thank you as always for coming on and speaking to us here on the programme. That's Dan SÖDERGREN, their AI and technology expert.